The camera cuts to the packed White House press room. Microphones clicking, reporters whispering, tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. In the middle of it all, Ilhan Omar sits in the front row, adjusting her microphone, trying to look calm, but the slight twitch in her fingers gives her away. Nobody knew that within minutes, everything was about to fall apart. Voiceover cuts in, deep, urgent, almost breathless. What just happened inside the White House press room has the entire anti-Trump empire running for cover. Fast flashes of headlines fill the screen. Ilhan Omar exposed. Karoline Leavitt just shattered the anti-Trump movement. Another frame flickers on screen. Omar shifting in her seat, biting the inside of her cheek, like she knows what's coming, but can't stop it. Voiceover sharpens. Karoline Leavitt didn't just speak, she exposed everything. A hard drumbeat kicks in, matching the tension rising in the room. Quick cuts between Omar's nervous glances and Karoline standing at the podium, calm but deadly. The room is seconds away from chaos, but nobody knows it yet. What you're about to see will change everything. This is where the story begins. The truth is just getting started. Subscribe now. For years, Ilhan Omar built her entire image on one thing: going after Donald Trump. Cameras loved her fiery speeches. Headlines painted her as the voice of resistance. Every time she stood at the podium, she threw out words like dictator, racist, and threat to democracy, and the media ate it up without question. Clips flash on screen. Omar shouting into microphones, crowds cheering, news headlines popping up one after another. Trump is destroying democracy. Ilhan Omar takes a stand against hate. Narration cuts in, slower now, like something dark is building under the surface. She thought she was untouchable. The screen cuts back to the press room, but this time in slow motion. Omar sits in the front row, pretending to be calm, but her eyes keep flicking toward Karoline Leavitt at the podium. She knows today's different. This wasn't just another press briefing. This was a ticking bomb, and it was about to explode. The room was dead silent, the kind of silence that makes your heart beat louder in your chest. Cameras zoomed in on Karoline Leavitt standing at the podium, calm, steady, almost too calm. Behind her eyes, there was no fear, just fire. The soft tick of the clock filled the background, counting down to a moment nobody saw coming. Ilhan Omar leaned forward, microphone in hand, trying to keep control. Her voice cut through the tension. Do you deny that Trump is leading America into dictatorship? For a second, it felt like the whole room was holding its breath, waiting for Karoline to stumble, waiting for the usual scripted response. But Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned slightly into the microphone, a small smile flickering on her face. No, Congresswoman Omar, I deny that you're telling the truth. The room shifted, like the ground itself had cracked. Reporters glanced at each other, not sure what they'd just heard. Omar's smirk twitched, for the first time. She didn't look so sure of herself. Karoline's voice stayed calm, but there was something sharp underneath, like she knew exactly what she was about to do, and she came ready to burn everything down. They fear the truth, but you can spread it. Hit subscribe. The press room felt heavier, like everyone inside knew they were watching something they'd never forget. Karoline's eyes stayed locked on Ilhan Omar, her hands gripping the podium. The smile was gone now, replaced by something colder. This wasn't just a press briefing anymore. This was a reckoning. The screens behind Karoline flickered to life, one headline after another flashing across the room. Ilhan Omar defends radical groups. Omar downplays 9/11 attacks. Trump calls out extremism. Omar cries Islamophobia. The air seemed to tighten with every image. Reporters shifted in their seats, some glancing at each other, others scribbling notes like they were seeing these headlines for the first time. Karoline's voice cut through the silence, steady, sharp, every word landing like a knife. For years, you've painted yourself as the victim, while twisting the truth for your own agenda. Omar sat frozen, her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. For the first time, the woman who had built her career on attacking others was the one under attack. The camera zoomed in on Karoline, her voice dropping lower. You call yourself a fighter for democracy, but the truth is, you've been hiding behind that word to cover what you're really protecting. The room stayed silent, not out of respect, but out of shock. Everyone in that room felt it. Something bigger was happening, and there was no stopping it now. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every eye was glued to the screens flickering behind Karoline. But what appeared next nobody was ready for. Bank transactions, foreign donations, names of lobbyist groups tied to secret meetings. The kind of evidence that doesn't just ruin careers, it destroys entire movements. The voiceover drops low, almost like a secret finally being revealed. They're not afraid of Trump's policies. They're afraid of what he'll uncover. The camera cuts back to Ilhan Omar, her eyes locked on the documents flashing behind Karoline, her face pale. This wasn't about political disagreements anymore. This was about corruption hiding in plain sight. Karoline's voice sharpened, breaking through the heavy silence. You call it democracy. We call it covering up corruption. A few reporters glanced at each other, shifting in their seats, like they were realizing they'd been defending something they didn't fully understand. The screen zoomed in on a list of names, politicians, organizations, donors, all connected in ways the public was never supposed to see. Karoline leaned forward, her voice steady but cutting. This is why they fear President Trump, not because of what he's done, but because of what he's about to expose. In that moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, like the truth everyone had been ignoring was finally out in the open. The room felt like it was shrinking, walls closing in with every passing second. Karoline stood tall at the podium, but all eyes were on Ilhan Omar. The woman who had built her entire career on never backing down, now sat frozen. Her smirk, the same smirk the cameras had captured in hundreds of interviews, was gone. The confidence she'd carried into that room vanished the moment those documents appeared on the screen. The voiceover drops, slower now, like the weight of the truth was sinking into everyone watching. For the first time, the loudest anti-Trump voice in America was completely silent. Reporters exchanged nervous glances, their pens hovering above notepads, unsure whether to keep writing or just watch history unfold. Behind Karoline, the screen flicked through leaked documents, foreign donations, suspicious payments, secret meetings buried under layers of bureaucracy. The same media outlets that had protected Omar for years were now watching her fall apart in real time. Karoline's eyes stayed locked on Omar, her voice steady. You've spent years calling others corrupt, but the truth was always much closer to home, wasn't it? Omar's fingers gripped the microphone, but she didn't speak. Not a single word. The room felt heavier with every second of silence, like everyone inside was realizing they had been sold a lie. And now the whole world was watching it collapse. The room was already falling apart, but Karoline wasn't done. She stepped closer to the microphone, her voice cutting through the whispers. They told you President Trump was the threat. Her eyes locked onto Omar, but this time, it wasn't just a face-off between two women. It was truth against lies. The screens behind her flicked again, one document after another flashing in front of the world. Foreign donations traced back to hidden accounts, secret meetings with lobbyists, deals made behind closed doors, all tied to the very politicians who claimed to fight for democracy. But the real danger was the system hiding behind people like Ilhan Omar. A ripple went through the room. Reporters leaned in closer, some whispering to each other, others just staring at the evidence they could no longer ignore. The camera zoomed in on Omar, her shoulders stiff, her gaze fixed on the table in front of her. The smirk was long gone. Now she looked smaller, like the weight of every lie was pressing down on her all at once. Karoline's voice stayed steady, but the words hit like hammers. They called President Trump a liar because they were afraid he'd exposed their truth. Omar's fingers tapped against the microphone, like she wanted to speak, but there was nothing left to say. The room was breaking. The system was breaking. Only the truth will win. Subscribe now. And for the first time, everyone could see it. By the time Karoline stepped away from the podium, the damage was done, not just to Ilhan Omar, but to everything the anti-Trump movement had built over the years. The press room stood still, like the air had been sucked out of it. No shouting, no follow-up questions, just silence, the kind that happens when people realize they've been living in a lie. The camera fades to black before flashing onto phone screens lighting up across the country. Social media was already exploding. comments pouring in faster than anyone could control. I've been lied to my whole life. Karoline Leavitt just exposed everything. Trump was right all along. Clips of the press conference spread like wildfire, millions watching in shock as the truth played out in front of their eyes. People who had spent years hating Trump were suddenly questioning everything. The voiceover comes back, softer this time, but carrying a weight the whole world could feel. Millions of Americans who once believed the lies are now waking up. Some were angry, others were heartbroken, but deep down, they all felt the same thing. They had been used. Inside the Democratic headquarters, phones were ringing nonstop. Emergency meetings were being called behind locked doors. They were trying to contain the damage, but it was too late. The truth was already out. Karoline didn't just expose one politician. She ripped the mask off an entire system, and now there was no hiding it anymore. The room was still frozen, cameras rolling, eyes locked on Karoline Leavitt. But she wasn't finished. She stepped forward, gripping the edges of the podium, her voice calm but heavy, like she knew her next words would break the internet. She looked straight into the cameras, not at the reporters, not at Ilhan Omar, but at the American people watching from home. This isn't about left or right. Her voice echoed through the press room, cutting through the silence like a blade. This is about the truth, and the truth always wins. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Omar, the woman who never backed down, sat frozen, eyes fixed on the table. Then the first camera clicked. Then another. Reporters began typing, their hands shaking, like they finally realized they weren't just covering another press conference. They were covering history. Social media went into meltdown. Headlines exploded across every major news site. Karoline Leavitt destroys Ilhan Omar. The truth bomb that shook Washington. Anti-Trump movement crumbles in live press conference. Karoline didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. The truth had finally come out, and there was no going back. The press room sat in stunned silence, but outside those walls, chaos was already spreading. Phones ringing inside political offices. Emergency meetings behind locked doors. The same media that once defended Ilhan Omar was now scrambling to control the damage. Omar disappeared from the spotlight. No interviews, no tweets, not a single word. The woman who never missed a chance to attack Trump had gone completely silent. The voiceover drops low, cold and haunting. This is only the beginning. The corruption is deeper than anyone imagined. Quick flashes of leaked documents, secret meetings, and breaking news alerts flicker on screen. Behind the images, one voice echoes through everything. Donald Trump's voice, the same warning he's repeated for years. They're not after me, they're after you. The music builds slow at first, then louder, like something bigger is coming. Because what Karoline Leavitt exposed that day wasn't just one politician. It was the whole system. The screen fades to black. One final line appears. The truth always wins. Do you support the truth? Like, comment, and subscribe below. Truth wins. The video ends, but the story? It's just getting started.